and welcome to the Zucre Recovery Life Podcast. Today we have Miss Patrice O from Texas sharing her experience, strength, and hope with us, and here to tell us what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So without further ado, I give you Miss Francis, Miss Patrice. Okay, come on in, Patrice.
All right. Good morning. And John, thank you so much for this opportunity to be of service this morning. My name is Patrice, and I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date is February 8th, 2019. I do have a sponsor. My sponsor has a sponsor. I have sponsees, and they sponsor. That was definitely not my story when I first came into these rooms in 2012. I have to share that I was not a one-chip wonder. Literally, I have a whole new respect for that first paragraph in how it works and how it talks about honesty. And it mentions it like 3 times, how if we can't be honest, that we can never recover, and I really thought that I was that person. Because when I came in the rooms, I was in the 4th stage of alcoholism, and I really felt like I was outside of my body. I was not a normal person, and thank God for the divine intervention that saved me. And I will tell you about that part of my story as well. But I was actually born in Giddings, Texas, which is 60 miles east of Austin. And we moved when I was about a year to Austin, Texas. And that's where I grew up. That's where I went to school and high school and everything. And, I didn't have a relationship with my biological dad, but he did die from this disease of alcoholism at 33 years old. And he was like a really horrible diabetic. And he, of course, was a heavy drinker, which led to his demise. And, even me knowing all of that about this disease, this gene that I have in my body of alcoholism, it wasn't enough to stop me. And it was as if I didn't even think it applied to me. I guess I thought I was different. My mom, she's not a drinker. I remember when I was a little girl and we would go to my grandmother's house and have family gatherings and things, and her sisters would like maybe 2 times they went to a little grocery store called Brookshire's, and they bought some mini cans of beer, like a Miller Lite, and they were those little bitty cans. I guess they were probably only like 6 or 8 ounces. And they had one of those, and then they would be like, ooh, like, ooh, I need to go to bed, and that's all I ever remember of my mom drinking. However, she had siblings like my uncles and things that drank alcoholically. And, of course, we can't diagnose anyone as alcoholic. I can't diagnose them, but they drank heavy. And really, it looked a lot like my drinking at the, what my drinking looked like at the end. But we never talked about treatment, getting help. It was just almost like alcoholism was a subject of taboo. We don't, it's like the little secret, And when I decided to go get help, finally, I was treated like an outcast. In my family, it's almost like mental health and addiction, we don't talk about it. And it's almost, I'm made to feel like I'm weak. It's like, you're not praying hard enough. You could quit if you want to. And so it was almost a situation like they were saying that I was exposing family secrets by going to treatment and by saying that I am an alcoholic and things like that. So I am the first and only person that has actually gone to get treatment. And I tell you what, growing up as a child, I was a very nervous child, very shy, and I was an overweight child. My stepdad used to joke with me and call me Fat Albert and stuff like that as a nickname. And, when I was growing up, I didn't really think much of it, but, sometimes I wonder if it actually kind of like affected me as far as my self-esteem and stuff like that. But I was always an overweight kid, I never did feel secure. When I was 14 years old, one of my mom's sisters, her youngest sister, she gave me a drink called pink champagne. So a lot of people don't even know what pink champagne is. And I always joke and say maybe it's the Ripple that Fred Sanford used to drink all the time on Sanford and Son. I mean, it's not the best tasting drink, but I just remember when I put it in my body, the relief that it gave me. And it was just like, wow, And because there was no alcohol in my house, because my mom didn't drink, my stepdad, who actually is my dad, he didn't drink. We didn't have alcohol in the house. Now, my stepdad liked to go out on the weekend because he liked to gamble. He played dominoes and on the weekend, and he would drink, and he would come home sometimes, and he would be so drunk. We'd wake up Sunday morning, it's time to go to church. And there he is, he's still asleep in the car. And my mama didn't drive, so we depended on him for transportation, or either we took the city bus. And I remember a couple of times he would like be throwing up outside. And so he drank pretty heavy on the weekends, but he never drank in the house, and we did not have alcohol in the house. Okay, so me being the shy kid that I was and didn't have much self-esteem, I didn't like hang around with the cool kids. I didn't even know that kids were drinking in high school. I didn't. So because I wasn't invited, right, to any of that. But all I know is that I never forgot how that drink made me feel. And when I got to college, I was still dealing with the self-esteem thing. But it was when I got to college that I was able to drink again. And, I had friends while I was in college, and I had a roommate and things like that. And they would like to go to the parties and all that stuff. And I would never go, because I always felt like, okay, well, I'm the fattest one, I'm not going. And I would stay home and I would drink. And I didn't see a problem with me drinking alone and not wanting to go out to public places and stuff. Yeah, I did date. I dated older men. And so I didn't have to go around anybody that was really my age too, and then that, of course, gave me the opportunity, I felt, to drink more. But, my friends, it was actually like became an issue. We would like have like almost knockdown dragouts because I refused to go anywhere. And now I see that it was because I didn't want to leave my master. Alcohol had already become my master at 18 years old. And I was in college for about 3.5 years. I did not finish. And and it was because the drink was, it was more important than anything. It was everything that I needed. So kind of fast forward a little bit, I got married at 22. I was pregnant. And I'm still with my husband today. And, he is really a social drinker, but, he could go as hard as I could go. But then one day he just said, and I think this had to have been at least 20 years ago. he told me, he said, this is crazy. He said, this is insanity. He said, oh, why am I drinking like this? And, and I know that he was doing it to make me happy. And he said, you know what? I'm not drinking anymore. I'm done. And because he's actually the type that can say, I'm just going to have one. I'm just going to have two. It didn't matter what he said, how many he was going to have. I was going to shut the bar down, you know. And so he just stopped, and he has never touched a drink again. He can get on an international flight and have free liquor offered to him, everything. He still didn't drink. We continued to go to the parties and all that stuff, and he never picked up another drink. So he actually thought that if he stopped drinking, that I would follow suit. Well, at the time, we didn't know that I was the real deal alcoholic. I see today that even in my 20s, when I was pregnant with my children, I was actually white knuckling it through pregnancies. I was restless. I was irritable. I was discontented. And I didn't know what that feeling was. I actually believed that everyone had that same effect from alcohol that I get when I put it in my body. And, and I was just so, how can I say, in denial about it, And so because it's not something that we address in our family. My brother is a real bad addict. Thank God he's in recovery now, but he's not going through a 12-step program, but he says he's not using. And, when we were growing up, there was always drugs and stuff around, and I never touched the drugs, and I know, I remember, like, I grew up in that era of, like, just say no to drugs. And I was a goody two-shoe. I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to be seen in a certain way, like it says in the book, like, I don't deserve, I wanted to be looked at in ways that I don't even deserve to be recognized as. And so he was doing his thing, and he was in and out of juvenile. And then he's in and out of prison, throughout his life up until about maybe 6 years ago. But the drugs never was something that I wanted to do. And I really think it was because it was illegal. And, I really think that's why I never wanted to try it. And then number two, he did some really crazy things while he was in his addiction when we were growing up. And I was just like, no, I'm not going to do that. But if I could have just had an opportunity to have a drink, I would have been good. So anyway, after I had, I had my children, and I was one of those nieces that would be like fussing at my aunties because they smoked cigarettes while they were pregnant. And I was like, how could you do that while you're pregnant? And da 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 da. And I wasn't a smoker, but when I I have 4 children, and they're all grown now. And unfortunately, I was drunk their entire childhood. In fact, I know now the description would be I was in oblivion, because I don't even remember so many things. And but while I was pregnant, I could hardly stand it. I was about to jump out of my skin. So with my first one, I didn't pick up a drink. And then when I had the second one, I remember that I did have, like, I don't know how many, maybe a few glasses of wine. And then with the third and the fourth, it increased. And I don't know how much. I don't think it was balls to the walls, like it was towards the end, But the point is that I never thought that I would be that woman who would drink alcohol while pregnant. And what I would use to justify it, and I would only do it secretly, like My husband would be the only person that would know, that I did it. And, on the news and stuff, I would see these reports that say, it's okay to have one glass of red wine while pregnant. And of course, they don't promote that anymore. So I did drink while I was pregnant. And this year, 2022 was the first year that I actually was able to say this out loud to my sponsor when I did my inventory. I had been in the room since 2012, did so many different inventories, so many different sponsors, and I never admitted about drinking while pregnant. And now I share it a little bit as a part of my story, not because I'm proud, but what I have found, not because I'm proud of it, but what I have found that is that a lot of women have done the same thing, whether it be drugs or alcohol. And it's a very thing that it's a thing that causes a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, but then but it reminds me that that's just one of those things that I can use as a message to another woman that she can recover. And she's not a bad person, because she drank during her pregnancy. She's sick. And that's what I know today is that I'm a sick person, and I was very sick. And that obsession was so much stronger than anything ever that I couldn't keep myself from a drink by my own power. So I know that today. But so that's just like one of the things I thought I would never do. As my children were growing up, as I was getting older, us alcoholics, we tend to be very great people. So, people love us. We tend to be just so much fun. A lot of us are helpful. We're intelligent. We're good employees, and I was lucky, even though I didn't have a degree, that I was able to always have good jobs. And I was very functional for years. I was functional for years. And then it was in my 40s that things got out of control and I ended up going to rehab. I actually went to my first rehab in 2012. And I went because I was about to lose a job. And then from there, that's where my journey, to recovery started. Now, my disease is progressing. I mean, and it is like, it's getting real bad. So now it's to the point that I lost a job and I really can't even keep a job anymore. My children, I thank God that, I always say that God was with me this entire time, even when everything was crazy, he was with me. Excuse me. And I didn't realize that until now, because it got to the point to where I was the breadwinner in my family. And so when alcohol became my master and more important than anything else, I didn't care if the bills were paid. I was not at home. I would be gone for days, weeks at a time. And I didn't care about the bills being paid. My family, we got evicted and I didn't care where everybody went. Yeah, I was that mother. I never thought I would be that mother. But I wanted to be free to drink and the way I wanted to drink, and my children, my uncle always tells me that I should be grateful because my kids did not end up in CPS care. But the community that that we lived in or still live in, they loved my kids. I will say this, like, I'm glad that my disease didn't get out of control until later, because, I was able to be the mother that I should have been and to teach them morals and values and things like that and respect. and everybody loved them. So when I started spiraling out of control, the community stepped in. My kids played sports and all and everything. So we had a lot of friends in the community that offered to take them in. And I was just going about my business. It's so insane when I think about it now. The way, this disease is something else, because it's the delusion that it brings is undescribable. How could I think that it was okay that my children were spread amongst all these different families in the community? I wasn't even thinking about what could have happened, but I'm just very grateful. I thank God that He protected them, and and today they're okay, except for my baby, the youngest one. Now he's the one that really got the brunt of my disease, and when I was actually pregnant with him, they asked me. They did like the blood work. They do blood work, of course, while you're pregnant. And I did some blood work when I was about 6 months, I think. And they said to me, we would like for you to do an amniocentesis. There's something with the blood work with the baby. And I said, what is that? And it was like, well, we stick a long needle in your stomach, and we try to get some of the fluid from the baby so that we can test the fluid for any like defects, etc. Right? And me, with my drunk butt, the first thing I say, because it's the county hospital, is I say, oh no, you're not going to use me for a guinea pig. I said, I have 3 other children and they're fine. There's nothing wrong with this baby. And of course, that he was the one that I drank more with. And so eventually, like about a month later, my insurance kicked in. I had just got a new job. So I left the county hospital's care, and then I went to a regular doctor. And then I never did follow through with the amniocentesis. The doctor saw the paperwork, and he mentioned it, and I told him that I wasn't interested. All right. So fast forward. So and then a couple of times while he was, my son was in school, they suggested like remedial classes and special ed and all this. And then it was really hard for me to grasp, because I'm like, there's nothing wrong with my kids. These kids are smart. They're doing well. Da 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 da. Again, I'm in oblivion. So when I got sober in 2019, my other children, they told me, they said, Mom, we tried to tell you that there was something wrong with him, but you never would listen. And you just, it was like you just had a deaf ear. And I told him, I said, I don't even remember y'all trying to tell me. I said, I just remember when I was pregnant. And then, of course, a couple of teachers mentioned something, and, I went off on them. And they said, yeah, there's something that's not right. Okay. So he was 19 when I got sober, finally. The baby was 19 and the oldest was 28. So after I get sober, then of course I'm interacting more. I'm present. And I see things like, I'll say, can you go and do so-and-so, so-and-so? And he'll say, okay. And then I'll come back and I'll say, hey, did you do so-and-so, so-and-so? No, I forgot, sorry. And then he'll go and run, and then I'll come back again. Hey, did you do that for me? Oh, no, And so I said, okay, now this is making sense, because he is having issues keeping jobs. And I'm like, if he is doing this at work, he's not able to follow directions, then this is the reason why he is not able to perform his duties, and then just very nonchalant and unconcerned. But then on top of that, we have addiction. And he says he's just doing weed, but I don't know, you know. And so with the untreated addiction and then the untreated mental health. So you can imagine what that combination is like. And, you know, I thank God that today that I am recovered, because if I was not recovered, I don't even know what this whole situation will look like. Because today I know that I can't do anything to help him to get sober, right? And I know that, you know, I'm a human, and it tells us that no human power. And so just like I have to be hopeful that God will give him the same grace that he gave me. I pray that this journey doesn't go as long as mine, but I pray that God doesn't give me the same grace, and that God gives him that same grace. And I'm so grateful that finally I have started doing all those things I never wanted to do that you see me doing today, like what I'm doing right now. For 7 years, I refused to share my story. I refused to carry the message. I refused to be active in a home group other than just to go to a meeting and jet as soon as they say amen. You know, I didn't want to talk to anybody, all the women coming to me trying to be nice. I didn't have time, you know, and I just refused to do any of that. I refused to go to sober living. Guys, this time I went to sober living at 50 years old. I'm in sober living. And I'll tell you what actually happened that actually got me to this point of this, where I had the gift of desperation, because that's what I had. So my oldest son had just graduated from college, and he actually went to school in Illinois. So he comes back from college, and by this time I had been living in a Days Inn for 3 years. And I thought that was okay, because I had been evicted from my apartment, and I went to that Days Inn and I never left. And so he came back home. We're living in the Days Inn, and I'm still with my husband. And by this time, I'm a 24/7 drinker. I am drinking around the clock. I'm drinking at least a handle a day, and that doesn't include the beer and the wine when I run out. I even wonder how I am even alive today based on the amounts that I drank. So I'm in this hotel, and so I don't go to sleep. At this point, I'm not going to sleep. I'm passing out, right? So I wake up. I come to, and then I finish the drink that I had before I passed out, or I'm going to fix another one. And this is another odd thing about me. I never let the cup get empty. In fact, I was that alcoholic that would take a few sips, and then I would go and just fill it back up. And I never let it get empty. So I came to, and I was fixing a drink, and my son one morning, and it was like 3 or 4 in the morning, he got up and he looked at me and he said, "You know what?" He said, "I am not going to stay here and watch you kill yourself." He said, "What is wrong with you? You didn't used to be like this, you know?" And he said, "This is insane." And so at this time, I'm working as a nurse aide, and not a nurse aide because I wasn't certified, a caregiver. And I liked that job because it allowed me to still drink. In fact, I was drinking their stuff. It was just insane. So he said, "I tell you what, if you need a ride to go to work," because I didn't even have a car. And so he came back with his car and he was like, if you need a ride to work, you need to take Uber or Lyft. He said, maybe if you don't have any money, then you won't buy alcohol. Use your money to get to work. And I just said, to me, he didn't faze me because I'm that kind of alcoholic. I don't need a dime. I don't need a penny to get a drink. I will get a drink by any means necessary. So he just broke down and cried right there. He said, you used to be my biggest fan, growing up, and because, he played Little League football, then he went to college and played football. And I was always his biggest fan. I would be like running down the sidelines with my cup in my hand. I'd be running with him. I was that kind of mom. So So he started telling me how he really felt, being in Illinois, a whole different environment. The winters are like totally different from Texas, and, no family down there or anything like that. And he actually broke his ankle like the first year he was down there. And he was like, I thought you were going to at least like come down to see me. And I never went to any of his games until his senior year. On senior night, we went to a game. And so he was just devastated. I didn't know how much I impacted him. And I tell you what, every day that I'm sober, I realize that I affected my family so much more than I ever thought I did, and that, I have suggested that they go to Al-Anon and things like that, but they don't, they're not interested in that, and I can't force them to do that. But I do see that I have really, really, that was a lot, because I don't know what those kids went through when they were living in all these different families and stuff. So anyway, at the moment that he was talking to me about how I made him feel and everything, he asked me if I could just not drink, just stop drinking for a while, as if I've never tried that. I've tried everything that's listed and more about alcoholism. When I read that, I identified with it so much because I tried all of that to stop drinking, still trying to convince myself that I could drink like a normal person. But I went ahead and I agreed. And I didn't drink for 2 weeks. And I remember we went out to do some shopping, and we had went to go get some ice cream afterwards. And he looked at me and he said, Mom, you're doing so good. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, let's go to Gloria's and let's have one margarita. So Gloria's is this Mexican restaurant that I frequent and all the time. So of course, when I go in there, the bartenders, they know me. So it had been 2 weeks since I had a drink. And when I tell you, when he said that we were going to Gloria's to have a margarita, my whole body started tingling from my head to my toe. I was so excited. I hadn't even put the drink in my body, and I was like already feeling it. And so we go over to the Glorias, we sit down, we get the margaritas, and I'm drinking mine when he's sipping his. And after I had a couple of drinks of one margarita sips, I looked at him, because now I'm feeling great. I'm like, thank God for this relief, and I looked at him and I said, hey, let me ask you something. I said, how do you feel when you put alcohol in your body? And he said, it's okay. I said, no. I said, no, how does it make you feel? And he said, I don't really, it's okay. And I said, no. I said, you just don't understand. When I put alcohol in my body, it just makes me feel so good. It makes me feel like I can do anything. I mean, I closed my eyes and I didn't even know that I had closed my eyes describing how alcohol made me feel. And I mean, it was as if I was in heaven. And I opened my eyes and my son was looking at me and he said, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And it was from that moment that my first step experience began. Because up until that point, I thought that everybody got that same effect from alcohol that I do. And the way that he looked at me as if I had lost my mind, I'll never forget that look. And then it was from then that I accepted that my mind and body was different. And of course, after that, after I had that margarita, I wanted another one. And he was like, "No." The bartender heard me going back and forth with him and he just gave me the drink. After that, it was on, right? I had not drank for 2 weeks and I'm not working no program or nothing. I was just not drinking, you know. So about 2 weeks later, I go to a conference with my daughter. She was the MC at a Christian women's conference. And I had to cook for them. And I had like been drinking like nonstop for days. And I get to the conference and I have the handle in my bag. And instead of me to go into the conference, I am in the hospitality room, sitting in a corner, drinking in a church. So, I grew up in the church. I went to church even up until the end. And, I was frustrated because I was like, gosh, I'm doing all this work in my church. I was a choir secretary. I planned all the events. I was like, why come God won't remove this obsession? I was getting very, very frustrated. And at that conference, I took a picture with somebody and I didn't know that the handle was hanging out of my bag. And my son called me and he was like, "What's going on? What are you doing? I thought you were at church." And I said, "I am. What is it?" And he said, "There's a picture of you on Facebook with that handle hanging out of your bag." And I was just like, "Oh my God," But of course, it's still, that wasn't enough to stop me. So I don't know what happened, what came over me, but one day I was in that hotel room and I was a blackout drinker as well, really bad blackout drinker. And I was in a blackout and all I remember is I was hanging up the phone. And when I hung up the phone, I said, "Oh, I just called and did an intake to go to detox." And I said, "Okay, well, let me call my husband and my son so they can come get me." And I don't even remember who I talked to or anything. I just knew I hung up the phone. So I called them and asked them to come get me. And what I thought was just a few hours, they said it was an all-day affair getting me there. I just remember that I was blacking in and out. And at the end, when they finally got to the detox place, I was screaming and kicking and shouting, it was just crazy. And while I was in that treatment center that I actually went to in 2012, I went there in 2012. And it was when I got there this time, it was as if I had never heard anything about this disease, anything from the big book. The words and everything was just like jumping off the pages. So the lady was chairing the meeting the next morning. And when I tell you, I was like soaking up everything like a sponge. I was so desperate, and she was describing the cycle of doom, that vicious cycle that's in the doctor's opinion that they talk about. And then so she was saying how, when we put alcohol in our body, then it causes that phenomenon of craving, and it just keeps going and going and going and going. And she was like doing her hands with circles. And I just screamed. I just said, "How do you stop it?" And she looked at me and she said, "Patrice, it's only a power greater than yourself that can restore you to sanity." And the reason why she said it like that is because she knew that I was there before in 2012, and she knew that I had been in and out of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm asking her, how do I stop it? And when she told me that it was only a power greater than myself that can restore me to sanity, that's when I realized that I didn't have a spiritual connection with God. I only believed in him. And that I was using God. I was just like, God, if you do this, I'll do that. All those were my kind of prayers. And so that's when I started examining my relationship with my higher power. And after that, I read in the book in the spiritual experience. This was like, for whatever reason, was so profound to me. I mean, I've always heard honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, but this time it was on a different level. On page 568, it says, "We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable." And then there's a quote that says, "There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation." And what that is saying is that if I have never worked the steps with an attitude of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, don't say that it doesn't work. It works if I am honest, open-minded, and willing. And from that day, I started praying for an attitude of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And what I even noticed is that even as a child, I was manipulative. I was a liar. I was sneaky. I was self-seeking, deceitful. I was all of those things before I even picked up the drink. And I finally understood what they say in the book when they say that alcohol is not my problem. I am the problem. Even without the alcohol, I have these character defects. So that's what motivated me to do things differently. So I'm in the treatment center on my 7th day, and they asked me, where am I going when I leave on the 14th day? And I said, I'm going home. And the lady looked at me and she said, "Patrice, do you know where you live?" Because I was living in a hotel. And she said, I said, "Yeah, but I'm going home to my family." And she said, "Okay, well, how's that working for you?" And by this time, this lady was actually in the treatment center in 2012 when I first went there. She was actually in there with me as a client, and she was still sober. So I said, I was just real flippant. Well, by this time in the treatment center, I'm reading 86 to 88 every day. And I was just so amazed that I actually, after I left the office, telling her that I'm not going to sober living, I went to the meeting room and there was nobody in the meeting room. And I just sat there in the meeting room and I said, "God, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it." And I would tell you, 50 years of being in church, I have never surrendered and said to God, "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it." But when I said it, it's like a load lifted off of me. And I heard him say, "Sober living." And so I went back to the office and I told the lady that I said, "I changed my mind. I'm going to sober living." And so she gave me the information for sober living. I started calling. Nobody was calling me back from the Oxford houses. And I told her, and she said, well, you can go to this place called the Dallas 24-Hour Club. And I said, I'm not going there, because this is like a shelter. And there's people that come from all walks of life, And it used to be like real raggedy and but she said, oh, it's not like it used to be. She said they have rebuilt it. They have a new building. It's only been there about a year and a half. And so I actually went to that treatment center. To the 24-Hour Club, and I was there for 6 months. When I got there to the 24-Hour Club, I clearly heard God tell me, he said, you're going to be here for 6 months. And when you leave, you'll be sponsoring women and carrying the message. And it was just so weird because I was so like, I was ready to do it. That's what the gift of desperation and a true step one experience gives you. It's like, I got to do this. And so I worked with my sponsor. I started carrying the message and sponsoring women. I had a sponsee at 2 months, and with me, I never wanted to do that because I was like, oh, what if she relapse? I didn't want to carry the message like, what if I say something stupid, But early in my recovery, within that 2 months, I went to a sponsorship workshop, and I raised my hand and I told them I was afraid to sponsor. So I said, because what if she relapses, And the lady looked at me and she said, who do you think you are? She said, you're not God. She said, you can't keep nobody sober, not even yourself. She said, your job is to put her hands in God's hand. And how do you do that? You take her through the steps. She said, if she relapses, that's between her and her God. You don't have the power to keep her sober. And that brought me so much relief. I started studying the big book because that was another thing. I didn't feel comfortable carrying the message or sponsoring it, not having read the big book. So I started going to big book meetings and things like that to get just some knowledge about the big book, knowing fully well, of course, that knowledge does not keep us sober. Self-knowledge is not enough, but it helps with sponsoring and carrying the message. So and after I left the Dallas 24-Hour Club, I went to Oxford, and I was in Oxford for 2 years. Actually, I was thinking before I went to the detox in 2019, I was such an awful alcoholic. It was so bad that I thought that I really needed to be locked up and put away for over a year or two. That's what I was thinking. But God did for me what I could never do for myself. But I will tell you that had God not intervened when I was in that blackout, I had no intentions to call for help. I was okay because I was having visions of them coming in, finding me dead in that hotel room and taking me out. I was having visions like that. And I was okay with it. And I never thought that I would get to the point that I would be okay with dying. That's the mental deterioration of this disease. I don't even feel like a normal person at this point. So so today, I sponsor women. I chair in-person meetings. I chair meetings on Zoom. Whenever somebody asks me to tell my story, I don't say no. I have a busy schedule, but I always try to work with them on their schedule. And today I work in that detox center that I went to. It's a recovery center for women. And so I worked there as a coordinator, a lead coordinator, and I worked in the aftercare program. And who would have known that I would be working there? That was not my plan either. I had a job, and the proposal came up for me to work there, and within like 3 to 4 days, I said yes. And I really felt like that's where God, where he wants me to be. I thank God that today this disease has shown me my purpose. And I tell you, the high that I get from being able to be a vessel of hope to women who feel like they will never be able to see life without alcohol. I mean, it gives me a high that I would never get from alcohol. In the end, alcohol stopped working. It wasn't even working anymore. I was just drinking to satisfy that physical craving. But today, I mean, I love what it says in the working with others. On that first paragraph, it says, nothing ensures immunity from drinking like working with others. It says, practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. So, and I'll tell you another passage that helped me understand about the need for me to carry the message, because I am a chronic alcoholic. A chronic alcoholic. And I just can't go to meetings. Meetings don't do it for me. Meetings is a part of my program. It's a big part of it, but that's not enough to keep me sober. And I found that out when I almost died going in and out for 7 years. So on page 14, this is one of my most favorite things to share in Bill's story, where it talks about that. It says, my friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others, as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. And so that's where it was revealed to me that part of it, enlarging my spiritual life, includes working with others. Today, I serve on a committee for the International Women's Convention. I also serve on a couple of other local recovery groups and things like that. So it's just like, honestly, I can't get enough of it. You know, I put as much, if not more, energy into my recovery as I did my disease. And when I tell you I worked hard in my disease to stay drunk, to be controlling, manipulative, all of that. And so today, this is it really is a new design for living, and I'm so grateful. You know, I have 4 years on February 8th. I never ever, I never ever thought that I would be able to see life without a drink. And you know, relapse prevention for me is 10, 11, and 12, because I'm not cured of this disease. I introduced myself as a recovered alcoholic, but I'm recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I'm not cured, and I only have the daily reprieve of carrying God's will into all my activities every day. That is my daily reprieve. My disease is waiting. It's waiting. It has its arms folded, and it's saying, come on back, baby. Come on back, Patrice. You always do. What you waiting on? Come back. That's what it's saying. So that's why I have to stay connected. This disease is cunning, it's baffling, it's powerful, and it is patient. It will wait. It will wait. So I have a spiritual toolkit. I put on my armor every day. I have to. I have to show up. And today I get to do all of these things. I am never cured of this disease, but I can recover. Thank you.
All right, Miss Patrice, fantastic. Fantastic message. It's great hearing from satisfied members of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, and you can hear the gratitude in their voice. Thank you for
Thank
taking
you.
the time to do this.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to serve.
Fantastic.
It's
Have a
an
great week.
amazing life. I can't explain it in words. It's indescribable.
Absolutely. Only someone who's been there knows what it's like, you know, know the feeling.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And you have a great weekend.
You too, John. Thank you.